Welcome to Sewing Quarter on location. We don't do this very, very rarely. But for some people, we make an exception. And our gentleman today is as an incredible exception. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really, really honoured to be sat here with Philip Jacobs. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
inviting us into your treasure trove.
It was so lovely of you all to come down.
Oh, we've had a lovely day. We've had a superb time down here. It's so beautiful. So we find ourselves in Dorset, which is where, Philip, you make your home for a majority of the year.
Yeah, I'm here from March till November.
So the best part of the year.
The best part of the year. But when I arrived this March, it was thick snow, and I only just made it here through the snowdrifts.
There are some steep hills we found coming down. Yeah, which was fun when they'd closed a road and we had to then turn around and... Anyway, now, at the moment, you're here, you're designing and bringing together glorious new artworks. And this is why we've come to see you today, because on Sewing Quarter, we have the privilege of launching your latest range, which is called Arcadia. How did this all come about?
Well, Arcadia is a new collection from my own label for Free Spirit Fabrics, which is my label's called Snow Leopard Designs.
Which hasn't been going for a huge amount of time, has it? It's still relatively new.
It's still quite a new brand, Snow Leopard. Because my work with the Kaffe Fassett collective was selling so well, the people at Free Spirit asked me to produce another line, and I've always loved snow leopards as they're such elusive, mystical creatures. But I thought Snow Leopard would be a fantastic name for a new line of fabrics.
There's a sneaky one here.
Yes, there's a snow leopard behind you. You have to be careful.
I think he's eaten. I think he's had lunch.
Yeah,
I think
he
we're
looks
okay.
like it.
So Snow Leopard came about, and this is the range that we are now launching, which is absolutely exquisite. But I think there might have been a little aha moment there for a lot of you at home going, that's where I recognise this style from, because of course you have been part of the Kaffe Fassett collective. So there's, Kaffe always describes it as sort of the three musketeers. There's yourself, there's Brendan, and of course Kaffe. But Kaffe takes your designs and then plays with the colour, because actually you do so much, there's not time to do all the colour.
That's sort of how it works. I go along and visit Kaffe at the moment about once a year, normally in November, and we call it Kaffe's Christmas. And that's when I unshow him everything I've been working on during the year, which I've done, and then together we pick out which designs would be good to go in the Kaffe Fassett collective collection with him and Brandon. When he first asked me if I would do designing for patchwork quilting, I said to him, is it okay if you work on the colourways? Because although I absolutely love colour, I'm not an absolute natural at it, in the sense that colours are absolutely pouring out of me all the time. I've got a more limited colour palette. Whereas with Kaffe, I regard him as the best colourist in the world.
We always say Kaffe has all the colour.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that is the beauty of it. So he gets the luxury of your stunning designs. And they are. So if you're sitting with a Kaffe Fassett collection bundle at home, you have some of Philip's work in there. And they're generally the floral, botanical, shell prints, the real natural, the real earthy, just gorgeousness, and it'll always be down the selvage, so you can always have a look and see. And then the colourways, obviously, Kaffe works with to then blend in with the others, and then you've got Brandon's quirkiness and Kaffe's glorious designs, and it works so well as an eclectic collection in a way. It's absolutely stunning. So then, does he get first dibs on it now that there's Snow Leopard as well, or do you do those separately?
That's an interesting question. It sort of works both ways. I've normally, in my head and physically, got about 5 different Snow Leopard collections going at once.
5?
Yeah. So I'm
Okay.
at different stages working on about 5 collections. Some of them are just ideas in my head. Others I've just done rough sketches to indicate what I want to do. Others are completely painted up. Others are over at the factory being printed. And others are being launched.
That's incredibly prolific.
But with Kaffe, I do a lot of work just for him. I know what Kaffe likes. I know what sells really well. So often for Kaffe, I'll do the more really big, powerful designs of things like great big ornamental kale plants. So those really huge ones, which I think are going to sell miles, I give them to Kaffe, or I try and say, Kaffe, look at this. I think you definitely need this one in the collection. But there are sometimes times where I show someone to Kaffe, and I think he's going to adore this, and he just sort of looks at it blankly.
Really?
Yeah, which has Kaffe and I joke about this, because then the next year you'll show it to him again, and he said, "Oh, why have I never seen that before?" And he sees it again for the first time.
Is that because it fits with where he's at, with what he's doing, do you think?
He knows what he wants in a particular collection. And I can do something which I think is amazing, but it's not what he's looking for at that moment. So then the next year he might think that's amazing. But if he goes on staring at it blankly for too long,
just take it away.
Then I pull it out. And I build a whole snow leopard collection around it.
So he had his chance.
He had his chance. So that's sort of how it works. But all the time anyway, I'm composing snow leopard collections in my head and painting them up.
Right.
So often Kaffe never gets to see them.
Okay.
Case in point is this Carp and Petals one.
Yes.
Which I never showed Kaffe, because I think he'd have wanted that one.
We might not tell him that bit.
No.
Let's talk about the carp here, because this is part of the range that we are launching today, and it is absolutely stunning. I know that you have a love for Oriental art, and I had made the assumption, possibly turns out wrongly, that this would have been inspired by Oriental art. But then I read somewhere that it was a pool that you'd walked past where a spring breeze had blown the petals onto the water. I was like, oh, you see, you can't always assume.
You're right on both counts.
Okay.
So it's originally I saw this Japanese woodblock print, which was very like this. It was a woodblock print of carp swimming under petals, and it was such an amazing image that I took it, then I developed it, and I added more carp and more petals.
You can never have too many.
No, till I'd got a whole design. But then again, when I'm explaining it, and what it also feeds into is when I've seen ponds with carp swimming and the petals and the spring breeze blowing down off the mountain into the temple garden. So it's like both things. You see the image and it fires up some memory inside you of something you've seen. So then you develop it and then you get it onto cloth. So you're right on both counts there. This
collection that we're surrounded by, I mean, it's just stunning. A lot of it was inspired by just local nature, local feathers. How does a carp end up with guinea fowl feathers from the local farm and eggs, and how do you gather a collection together that seemingly didn't necessarily have a connection?
That's an interesting question again, because it's like an organic process, and you start off often with the designs not quite knowing where they're going to go.
Right.
Is this going to Kaffe? Is this going to snow leopard? Then I definitely think, no, I definitely want that for snow leopard. Then I start to build up other things around it. I think what's going to work really well with this but not necessarily be exactly on the same theme.
Okay.
So with Arcadia, and the word Arcadia is a Greek word, it means a vision of pastoral beauty.
So
And
taking it back to nature.
yeah, so I'm thinking of natural forms in nature, which you'll see in your daily life. Well, you don't always see carp sometimes, which are incredibly beautiful. Then you start putting it all together, and it all seems to fall together into one whole.
It is beautiful because you've got the eggs, you've got the feathers, you've got the fish and the florals as well. It's all so exquisite. Are these the actual ones that set it?
Yeah, those are some of the actual feathers from the farm shop.
Wonderful.
I go down to the local farm shop to buy my supplies, and they've got all these bantam hens and things, and turkeys wandering around, and I pick up their feathers, and then I come back and just start laying them out, and there suddenly you've got a design ready made.
Yeah, I read this that it's you collect things, a great collector, and you can see that from, I call it a treasure trove of your home because it just is your studio. And is that how you start to see patterns? You lay out collections of things and a pattern emerges. Which comes first?
If you're an intensely visual person, as I am, I see everything. I almost think visually rather than thinking analytically. You see something, a completely ordinary thing that just completely inspires you, and then you start thinking, how's that going to work in repetition?
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, bingo, you've got your design. But it just starts off with, you're going about your daily business quite innocently, and you just suddenly see something. It might be an ammonite down on the beach or a shell on the beach. And then you think, just imagine putting that shell in repetition, or having the shell in a stripe, or having it in a sort of zigzag pattern. The more ideas you produce, the more designs you produce, the more ideas bubble up inside. And you're almost tumbling over yourself in the desire to make these things manifest.
Now you mention ammonites.
Yeah.
Because when we were looking to find, we were like, it's fine. We just need to find a place that has a whole load of ammonites on the doorstep, and that will know that we've arrived.
Yeah.
One of my favourite quotes that I've heard from you is that, you know, the key to happiness in life is to have many things that you're passionate about, and nature obviously is one of them. Dinosaurs, another, and your fossil collection is extensive. And just behind us out on the terrace is our whole collection of ammonites that you've just found this year. But your eye must be, because I walk on beaches, I don't find ammonites, I don't trip over ammonites. How is your eye so keen to find these?
I sort of liken it a bit like your sort of mind and your eyes are sort of like a computer, and you have to switch it on to ammonite mode. Or if you're looking for dinosaurs, no, forget ammonite mode, you switch it on to dinosaur mode.
Okay.
And for instance, with dinosaur bones, they have this very sort of particular grain to them.
Okay.
It's the grain which you see in an ordinary bone, but it's fossilized. Often they're brownish in color, particularly when they're wet in the sea. And so if I'm walking on the beach looking for dinosaurs, I switch my mind into look out for brown speckled things.
Okay.
And then you're walking on your eye then just homes in on anything which is brown and speckly.
Okay.
Whereas with ammonites, if I'm at my ammonite place, which is a sort of valley up just below Bedminster, then I think you have to switch into another mode, which is ammonite mode, and you're looking just for the sort of circular edges of the ammonites. You'll see a little one just sticking out of the mud or out of the rocks, and then your mind homes in on it. So it's like you have to turn your computer mind on to registering these different forms in different places, but you have to know what you're looking for or you'll miss it.
I think that's the key, because I had wondered, because you grew up near water, didn't you? You grew up near a river.
Right by a river, yeah.
And used to spend a lot of time on the water. And I remember reading that as you grew up, you found an immense feeling of happiness and bliss just being in nature and just looking in depth at natural things. So for me, I wondered if it was almost a skill and like a muscle memory that you'd developed of seeing more than your average person sees, because you're looking for these patterns, because you're looking for, well, how does the light work with that? But you're saying it's just a mode. Switch it.
Yeah, it's like a sort of mode, but it comes from experience. When going back to Kaffe, because he's so finely tuned to colour, I remember years ago, back in the 70s, going on the tube with him in London, and all the time he's sort of going on into ecstasies when he sees two people in different coloured clothes sitting together. He's so finely attuned to colour and how colour works. So you absolutely see these amazing combinations everywhere. With me, it's more about form and pattern.
Okay, but it works so well.
Yeah.
All of it together.
Yeah.
I remember Kaffe being very taken, where we are based in Birmingham, very taken by all of the graffiti that was around. There's the colour in it.
Kaffe would like that. Yeah.
I suggested his next book should be, Quilts of Birmingham, but he went with America. I mean, I can't imagine why. Now, you haven't always designed fabrics for quilting, have you? I mean, you went to boarding school, and I know you found out I was previously a maths teacher. Please don't hold that against me. I know maths wasn't your favourite subject. But then, where did you go from boarding school? Was art encouraged there for you?
I was quite lucky. It wasn't a very academic boarding school.
Okay.
And I'm not a very academic fellow. So my brother, who was much more academic, went to a very academic school as a scholarship boy. Right. But I went to a boarding school out in Berkshire, quite near Reading, and it had these about 300 acres of woods and lakes.
Oh, wow.
And in the end, I even got my very own room. I started off in a dormitory, but I had my own room. I even had my own antiques in it and all my favourite books. And I had all my paintings on the walls.
Did they know they were into someone quite special at that point, when a teenager has antiques and those sorts of collections? And because actually from the age of 14 you asked if you could go and meditate and learn to meditate. Now, they wouldn't let you until you were 16.
Yeah.
But that's not a usual request.
I think it confused them quite a lot, because to succeed,
I like that.
Yes, to succeed at boarding school, it's best if you're academic and very good at rugger or cricket.
Yes.
I used to get put in the first 15 for rugger because I'm a big fellow. I didn't really like it that much. I preferred cross-country running because that's like going for a walk at high speed. And you can enjoy the nature. So gradually, what happened was all the maths fell away very early on, because that clearly wasn't on my path, and the Latin, and all the sciences fell away. And I managed to get it so nearly all the time, almost every lesson, I was up in my room painting. I don't know how I managed that, but I wangled it like that.
Well, I salute you. I'm sure there are many a child that would wish that they could have that.
And then I sort of thought, how can I earn my living by painting? Because that's the main thing I'm good at. And so I applied to a couple of art colleges, which I got accepted into. And even when I got to art college, I didn't know, I just knew I wanted to earn my living painting colours with a paintbrush.
But you'd known that since the age of 5. I mean, when your mother asked you, you said, I want to be an artist.
Yeah.
So this was set out for you.
We had a famous artist lived up the road from us called Terence Cuneo, and he was very well known for painting train pictures. And my mother,
have you ever painted a train?
I've never painted a train. But my mother said, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I said, I'm going to be a famous artist like Mr. Cuneo. That was at 5. After that, I wanted to be a soldier and I wanted to be a farmer, and other things, and an antique dealer, but then art came back again.
Well, you've got the antiques. I mean, we're surrounded by stunning pieces, and the art is here. clearly. And I mean, you mentioned before we started filming that, oh, I'm going to photograph the Milky Way this evening. So actually, I'm not sure you left the sciences behind. I think you just found them in your own way.
I think I'd find science more interesting now. If you'd been my teacher, it would have been a different story, because I'm sure you're a really inspiring teacher. But the way it was presented, it was just basically to get you through your GCSEs or whatever it was, your O-levels as they were called then. And it wasn't inspiring.
It's not for everyone.
And
it's a different way to learn.
Even history was made so dull. And I'm riveted by history, but it was all about the repeal of the Corn Laws and 19th century English history. Now, all of it really rivets and fascinates me, even science. Because even the dinosaur bones, when I find new bones from new species, I'm adding to science.
Now, hang on a minute, because this isn't a general sentence that many people can throw out there. When I discover new species of dinosaurs, but you have.
Yeah.
You actually have, and her name's Brittany.
Brittany.
Was she found locally?
She was found at Kimmeridge in about exactly August 2003. I found Brittany.
So you're walking along the beach. And just, is that a dinosaur vertebrae I see there?
I was walking along the beach with a girlfriend, and I was looking for dinosaurs, because that's what I do. And
I'm sure she was thrilled.
She seemed to quite like it. She used to race ahead of me and say, "Is this one?" And anyway, on this occasion, I saw this single vertebra in the rock. I said, hooray, I found a vertebra. So I got my hammer and chisel out and I started chipping it. And it had another vertebra fused to it. So I thought, I've got 2 vertebrae. And I chipped it and I got 3 vertebrae. And I found I had this whole spinal column going off. And then I started finding ribs going out sideways from it.
So at what point do you get seriously excited?
I would have been quite happy with a vertebra. I would have been very happy with 2 vertebrae. And I'd always wanted a whole column of vertebrae because they looked so beautiful.
Yeah.
But then famous fossil collector Steve Etches walked along at that point, who now has his own museum.
You see, these things just happen.
Yeah.
Because obviously, as you do, you've stumbled across this, and then a world famous guy comes along just to help, or
he advised me, first of all. He said, you've got a whole skeleton there. I don't know if it's heading towards the skull or heading towards the tail.
Right.
But the way to do it is to dig a trench round it. You mustn't break it up. You must bring it out in huge slabs, big blocks, so you have everything fully articulated still. And then you can bring it out of the blocks later. Because
he told you were being very Victorian about the way that you were doing it.
Yeah, he said you're like the Victorians. You're just collecting the spine.
Because that's the thing. I mean, how would you know how to excavate a dino? I mean, you would. It's not something that you do every day. How often do you find an entire dinosaur?
Yeah.
So how would you know the best way to remove it?
Yeah, I've been finding a lot of sort of limb bones and things on their own and huge vertebrae, but I'd never found a fully articulated skeleton before. So I didn't have the knowledge of how you're meant to go about it. But he very kindly showed me how to do it, and he came and helped for one day when we were working on the skull, which was huge. And now, since I've gifted it to his museum...
You've been incredibly kind and gifted a lot of your fossils and finds, haven't you?
I'd sort of run out of space to put them, to be honest.
I read somewhere, or an interview that you'd done somewhere, and you said, well, this dinosaur's staying with that friend.
Yeah.
I thought, of course. I mean, for me, it's finding a dog sitter.
Yeah.
For you, it's a dinosaur sitter.
Yeah. Due to life circumstances, I don't actually physically own a home. And when you've got a whole dinosaur museum and a whole Oriental art museum and a whole textile museum, various other museums, it's quite difficult if you have to keep moving.
Have you always been an avid collector of things?
I used to collect elephants when I was going back to 5 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
happily not life-size
No,
ones.
small elephants.
Okay, I'm sure your mother was pretty relieved that
Yeah.
they were smallish. And is that the first thing that you remember collecting?
Yeah, elephants was the first thing.
So where did you progress from elephants? What's the next collection that you went to?
Elephants, it went military after that.
And you still have a lot of things military.
Well, I gave all my military stuff away.
Right, but we've walked past a whole load of casings.
But that's new again, you see.
This is new military,
Yeah.
new old military.
By the time military was about sort of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then I became a hippie, so military
didn't fit.
Military didn't fit, so I gave most of it away to people. I also wanted to join the army in that phase.
Okay, right.
And I realised I didn't really want to be in the army after all, because I'd have to play rugger and things.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But as you say, just recently, I've been walking again the way I do. I walk down to the beach for my swim, and walking across the ploughed fields, I suddenly started picking up mortar bomb tail fins in the ploughed field. I thought, that's interesting, because it's like this place has obviously got a history to it, which I don't fully know about.
I have a feeling you'll find out about it pretty soon, though. Yeah.
And then I started even finding American ammunition, and I thought, that's interesting. There must have been Americans here just before D-Day. So then, for my birthday, I got a metal detector. And that's only about a month or two ago. Because
you share your birthday with John Scott.
Yes.
Yep.
19th of June.
We will all remember this.
Yeah. Lots of presents, please.
Including metal detectors. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So now, it's just a brand new interest. The military has suddenly come a full circle. And just for the last 2 or 3 weeks, some evenings when it's cooled off a bit, I'm down there just seeing what I can find, and it's really fascinating. So
we need to look out in the future for collections with a military edge
to them. I don't think I'm going to introduce it into the textile somehow. Dinosaurs maybe, but military things probably not. Okay.
So we've started to take a look at your new range. There's so much I want to ask you about everything. And the Ammonites obviously are what you found locally. I have an image that I can't get out of my head of you dragging dinosaur bones back from the beach over your shoulder. That might just be in my head, but you have to get them home somehow, I'm guessing. But the Ammonites, was this another case of you laid them out and the pattern came? Because you've got a stunning Ammonite print in your new collection.
I'd sort of always been fascinated by the actual pattern of Ammonite. And I'd done for Kaffe, I'd done quite a few shell patterns.
Yes.
There's various ones. There's one called spiral shells, which I'd made up of snail shells. And then I thought the Ammonites will look really great as a tonal design, just two tones of one colour. I can show you some of the art.
I'm looking at 2 of them right next to you there.
Find the artwork.
Oh, we've got the actual artwork as well.
Somewhere.
Because you work in gouache, don't you?
I work in gouache, which is like an opaque watercolour.
And I never realised you could get the depth. I always assumed, until I met Kaffe, that you worked in oils and in acrylics because of the depth of colour that you managed to get.
There we are.
And that's the original.
That's the artwork for the Ammonite design.
Wow. So then up here are these different colourway ideas?
That was me thinking out loud in colourway ideas. I did it originally in 2 tones of blue, and then I thought of doing a very sort of stony colourway.
Which is beautiful for neutrals and quilts. Gorgeous.
And then I thought it would look good on the black and white because people like black and white. But the actual colourways they've done.
There's one right by your elbow behind you.
Oh yeah, yep. Here we are. There's this. They've changed my blue. They've made it a deeper blue.
But that's the same print size, isn't it? I mean, they're pretty much.
I think they've reduced it slightly. Yeah. I don't mind because they know more about quilting than I do. I know nothing about quilting.
So how do you start designing for quilters with no knowledge of quilting?
I'm learning on the job.
Okay.
And basically what you have to do is you have to sort of follow your instincts, and you have to produce something which you think is visually amazing.
Okay.
And if you think
Tick. Yep.
if you think it's visually amazing, other people tend to. You just have to go with a sense of amazing, go with visually very powerful, and then other people find ways to work with it within their needlework.
Okay, so that leads me on to my next question, because you have the large, beautiful print of the carp. Then you've got your mid-size, still quite large florals, and again, quite a large print here, feathers. But then there's also the leopard spot, and you describe this as a tonal blender. Now, does that come once the rest of the collection is in place? To go, actually, I need something that's going to let these really have the focal point and just be there in the background supporting?
From experience, you learn how to put a collection together.
Okay.
And from my background, for many years I was doing furnishing fabrics. So I learnt how to put a furnishing collection together, and it's not that different from a quilting collection. You need a big design, which is like your statement,
Yeah.
which people say wow to. You need a good dents all over, which is very practical and usable in multiple ways. And you often need a stripe. You need something with a bit of space in. You need a tonal design, which is like the blender, which from a distance works as a solid colour if you're making a quilt. It's almost like you call it a solid. Then you often have, in the furnishing world, we call it a ditzy, which is a very small little pattern, which again the quilters will sort of often use around the larger images. But I'm learning all that on the job.
No, I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed. And now you've picked this out, so I can't ignore this. Gorgeous.
That was my artwork for pans. It's called violas, because I've already got a design called Pansy.
So as you're painting, do you always do a block of the colour down the bottom?
Yeah, I have to do that for the printer.
Okay.
And I'm limited by how many colours I can have according to the upward repeat of the design.
Right.
So in this case I went for a 16-inch repeat, which is, I've got the 13 colours I can use for that. And this particular one, I based it on some old antique botanical illustrations I had, which is very similar to that. It's like all these pansies tumbling over each other in profusion.
It's exquisite.
And I just thought that would make such an amazing print.
Because this is another place that you get your inspiration, isn't it? Is from antique art, artwork, and
antique textiles. I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of old antique 19th century fabrics and wallpapers.
So if we thought that we had a big stash at home, Philip's
you've
is
got
bigger.
nothing.
Yeah. And so is it a matter of the carp are there, the feathers are there, and then do you just go and rummage and go, oh, actually, I'll have a viola?
I sort of think, how's it going to fit together? What's going to work really well together? And I also know, I've learned from experience what the ingredients for a classic collection is. And in my case, my best-selling collections are the ones where there's quite a bit of nature. It's not all floral. There's some powerful floral, but you might get shells and feathers and other elements all working together. And I found those are my best collections.
Because you, like you say, you haven't always done quilting fabrics. You did interiors and furnishing designs, working for the likes of Liberty, Sanderson, the big names, the really big names. How does that come about?
What, working for them? It just sort of happens.
But because I read somewhere that, were you still at college and getting collections together, and did that then fuel you to then go into that side of things?
The way it started is going back to art college. At first, all I knew I wanted to do was paint. And my mother said you should do graphic design because no one can earn a living as a fine artist, because I love painting landscapes. And so I went on to art college, and the tutor said, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "I think I want to be a graphic designer."
Right.
And when I did the graphic design course, I realised I did not want to be a graphic
So your
designer.
mother wanted you to be a graphic
Yeah.
designer.
She said,
okay.
"I think you'll be good at doing big posters and things,"
Okay.
which is fair enough. But once I actually saw that it was all letter set, and it was so boring from my point of view. And one of the tutors, a very kind man called Mr. Hemmingsley, said, "I think you'd be good at textiles," because he was both a graphic designer and a textile designer. He looked at my copies I'd done of Tibetan paintings and Japanese paintings, and he said, "You'll be good at textiles." So I went and did the degree course in textiles, and it suited me. And then at my degree show, which we had in the basement of Liberty's, an agent.
That's it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I met an agent. He's dead now. He was called Barry Daniels, and he started asked if he could show my work. So I then started designing collections for him, which he sold around the world in Japan and America and France. And
So all these artists that wait for their big break, and yours came straight out of college. Someone
yeah,
recognised this passion.
he thought he could sell what I'd been producing, and then it just built from there. I worked.
So you say follow your bliss. I've heard you say this before. Follow your bliss, and then everything else comes.
If that was an American mythologist called Joseph Campbell, and he said if you follow your bliss, doors open for you where you didn't know doors were going to be. And that's exactly my experience. So you find where your bliss is. What is the thing that really lights you up? What's the thing that makes your eyes shine? And then you go into that fully. So it doesn't matter what it is. Everyone's bliss is different. And you work away at it. And for a long time, you may have very little money, but that doesn't matter because you're happy. And
because you're doing what you love.
You're doing what you love. But more or less, certainly, almost certainly, at some point, money will follow.
I really wish that as career advisors in schools would tell you that.
They don't tell
They
you
don't
that.
tell you
No.
that. No, they tell you to go and be an accountant
Yeah.
or a lawyer or something, you know.
Yeah.
They never say follow your bliss. And I really believe you. I think this is exactly it. Follow your bliss, and if nothing else, you'll be happy.
You'll be happy.
You know, and then everything else falls into place.
At some point, you'll probably earn your living as well.
What I find very interesting is your take on life, that there is a movie, you describe it as this movie of life, and that everything kind of falls into place. Trust the movie. So as a 5-year-old, did you know when you said I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to be a painter, did you know then about your movie?
I've always had a strong sense of that my movie was already there, and that I was sort of treading an already laid out path. And very often I'd think, oh, this is meant to happen now, or this person's meant to appear, and suddenly they would appear. So as a philosopher, I sort of go on direct personal experience rather than reading lots of books of someone else's direct experience.
Well, you've written 2 of your own instead.
Yeah.
You know, perfect. Yeah. And then, so what has this experience shown you?
This is just speaking personally, and it might be different for other people, but it's shown me that in life you don't have to worry, that everything is working out exactly as intended.
So you're always where you're meant to be.
Yeah, always. You're never in the wrong place, ever.
Which is a big thing to believe, and you know, even on those low days, you're still meant to be there.
In your life journey, some of your experiences will be absolutely horrific, which is the nature of life. Everyone has total bliss and total horror.
But you need the horror to highlight the bliss.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it as bliss if you didn't have the horror. So life goes on like that. Behind both the bliss and the horror, in my experience again, is something which is always looking out through your eyes when you're 5, when you're 64, which is total stillness, and a lot of happiness emanates from it. So, just going back to the thing about the path to happiness is being passionate about lots of different
Yes,
things.
I love that.
That's one aspect of happiness. That's happiness in your life. Have masses of things you're interested in. Then you're dying to wake up in the morning and get on with your passion.
Yes, because there's so much to put in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you have moments, particularly when you have moments of intense beauty which stills you, notice your sense of I, which lies behind your day-to-day sense of I. So there's I am Philip, I am an artist, I am a man, I'm born on June the 19th. Then there's just your basic sense of I am, which lies behind that, and that never changes, and it's always still.
Because it's part of being the bigger
It's part of the
part
universal.
of the universe.
Yeah.
You're there. Because this is another side of everything that you do, the influences, and actually how you met Kate.
Yeah.
So we know you as an incredible artist. Some might know you through Liberties, through Sanderson's, through the work that you've done previously. But actually, you're a sheikh as well.
I am technically a sheikh.
And you met Cave back in the 70s through learning to turn.
Yeah.
And we, at Saren Quarter, we had the last prints that we had from you. One of them was called the Whirling Dervishes.
Yes, that was it.
And now it all fits into place. Like, well, of course, but of course. You went at 14, you wanted to learn to meditate.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed until you were 16.
Yeah.
And then you went to a place called Collet House.
Yeah.
And there you learnt to meditate.
Yeah.
And then the dervishes came across from Turkey.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, I learnt to meditate when I was 16 because at school they wouldn't let me go before then. And I had to convince the headmaster to let me go up to London one Sunday and learn to meditate.
Did you have to have a letter from your mother?
My mother had to, and I threatened my mother. I said, "You've got to write this letter because I'm going anyway. If you don't write the letter, I'm going to be in deep trouble." So I learnt
Your poor mother.
Yeah.
I feel I would like her a lot.
You would like her. She was quite a character. Then at Collet House, they'd been asked to preserve this tradition, which was the Mevlevi dervish turning from Turkey, which had been banned in Turkey in 1925 when Kemal Ataturk tried to secularize Turkey. So all dervish orders, anything they regarded as superstition from the past was made illegal. So the poor dervishes wanted somewhere to preserve it.
It went underground, didn't
it
they?
went underground. Yeah. So it was a sheikh from Turkey came over and taught it in London, and it was carried on. It was in 1963. And I saw it for the first time in 1971, and it made me incredibly happy just hearing the lovely live music and watching all these people. I went away beaming all over my face. I thought I'd love to do that. And
Kay followed in the 70s. He, growing up in California, had heard about the dervishes, and he'd heard about one of your teachers whose name I really cannot pronounce because it's Russian.
Oh, it was Uspensky.
Yes, that's the one. And through that knowledge, he came to the same place that you did, and like you, decided he was going to learn to turn.
Yes. He describes it in his autobiography, the actual training, which is very physically grueling.
So you can both turn, and it is very physical, because just the holding out of the arms is incredible.
Try holding your arms out for 10 minutes, let alone half an hour.
Just amazing. And you learned in 1971, and still to this day it is influencing your artwork.
I learned to meditate in 71. I learned to turn in 76.
Right.
But Kate and I met at another dance class in Collet in 73.
Okay.
And I can still, because I've got a sort of video memory, I can replay any bit of life back, and I can see myself walking into the studio, and there was Kate and his friend Richard Womersley and another girl called Sue Cassini, all standing by the piano. and Kaffe was tall and had a beard then, and Richard had a beard. And I got this visual image of seeing Kaffe for the first time, but not knowing 45 years or more later what an impact and an influence he'd have had.
So did you hit it off then, or has this just been something that your paths just kept crossing?
We were very good friends then, both he and Richard. I became good friends with them. And when I left art college, I worked with Kaffe on one of his collections for Designers Guild, which is the furnishing fabrics. And during the 70s and 80s, I used to go and visit Kaffe because I used to do a lot of photography, and I used to do slideshows for. He always said I used to turn up with a dolly bird and do a slideshow. So I'd do all these landscapes. He'd often have his friend Steve Lovey over, who was a famous still life photographer. And so, but then as I got more involved in the furnishing world and Kaffe stopped being a dervish, I think it is physically tough, and I think it became too difficult for him. And then we sort of lost touch. I'd just see him now and again, sometimes at the Decorex trade fair, I'd bump into him. And then we reconnected again in 2004 when I was living in East Dorset, and he and Richard came. They'd been visiting my brother, and they came to visit. And Kaffe said, "Ooh," he saw what I was working on, and said, "This would be good for patchwork quilting." And that was the start of the next phase. So I have to thank Kaffe deeply for introducing me into the patchwork quilting world.
It's part of your movie.
It was on
Clearly,
the movie.
it's part of the movie.
Yeah.
Does it have a soundtrack, your movie? Because mine does. I have a movie too, and it's got a soundtrack.
Yeah. There's favourite tunes. There's some which I've had all the way from when I was about 12, which are almost like the soundtrack. Probably The Doors' Light My Fire, the long version of the organ solo, is one of my soundtracks. The most amazing thing I've learnt about life, not everyone would agree with me, and that's absolutely fine. Everyone sees it differently, and that's right. But my experience is it's this immaculately composed movie, and you can trust it. At the time you're in a horror, your life's just fallen apart, you've lost your health, you've lost your house, you've lost your work. It doesn't look like it.
Well, I was going to say, because I mean, we're not talking that you've just had a really blessed life and everything's always gone according to plan. You know, you have had extreme highs and extreme lows in your life, and your career has followed a similar ebb and flow.
Yeah, my career's disappeared at times. There was one point where I thought, that's it, I'll never be a textile designer again. It was late 90s when I'd been design director of big furnishing fabric company Ramson and Crocker, and then we were providing the world with their floral chintzes, and floral chintz just went completely out of fashion because minimalism.
Oh no!
It was all beige and white and IKEA and stuff, and because they had their phrase "chuck out your chintz."
No.
And
that's not great for an artist like you, no.
No, it's not, because we're into decoration. So all my work at that point, I've had other points, just completely job went, that was it.
So what do you do in those moments? Where do you have to try and change to suit a trend, or do you stay true to what you love?
In my case, furnishing fabrics had gone through a really hard time, so all the companies were in trouble. So no one was really going to want to buy your designs, particularly not intense florals. So what you do then is you almost switch over to another mode. So I did a lot of dinosaur hunting. I'd saved up enough money to live on for a few years, and because incidentally, someone had told me you're going to lose your job at a certain point,
right?
And that was several years before, so I really started saving. And then I started writing books. So I tried to assimilate my life experience in a way which would help other people going through a similar experience, that when your life falls apart, it's actually okay. You don't have to worry too much about it. Just keep on kicking, and eventually it all falls back together again in its own time.
And it has, and
Yeah.
this has been your experience, hasn't it? Is that you know, yes, you have those lows, but you come back and this happens,
Yeah.
and this is just stunning.
When you're in the low, it's almost clearing you out in a way. And then after it, when you emerge, you get this amazing rush of creativity happens. And life sort of goes on like that.
So it's like coming from winter to spring.
Yeah.
You know, and everything blossoms again and is beautiful again.
Yeah.
And all is good.
And it's better the next time. You almost get it fuller. After you lose it, then you get it back again. It's fuller when you get it back
because
again.
There's more appreciation?
It's partly there's more appreciation, and partly the experience of letting go of everything takes you deeper in yourself, and somehow, I don't know how to describe it, when it comes back, the ideas you're bringing up are fuller and more beautiful.
So we've got this collection, which is very full and very beautiful. But you did send me a picture.
I can't even let you mention the word.
The next collection, which
yeah.
I'm very excited for as well.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say that it might include another passion?
Yeah, you can mention the passion.
Called Neddy.
Neddy the magic horse.
Yes. Now, tell us about Neddy the magic horse, because he's become quite a sensation.
Yeah, I've made Neddy the magic horse world famous.
Do his owners even know?
His owners don't even know.
Brilliant.
The way it was near where I used to grow up, near Hampton Court, is where in the winter in particular I go and do my walking along the river with Helen. And one day all the fields and the river was flooded, and this beautiful great gypsy cob stallion had escaped from his field, and he was wandering along the riverbank where the water was in flood. And when I saw him, I said, "Look, there's Neddy." And when I met Neddy, he was so loving and so friendly and so characterful.
Probably quite relieved as well.
Yeah, he trotted along with us.
Got a rescuer.
Yeah, and then I discovered ever since then we've visited Neddy and fed him carrots and apples, and we sing to him. And on Facebook you can see our videos of us singing to Neddy, and he comes galloping over.
He loves the song.
He loves the song. And then I groom him, and he goes very quiet and loving. Whereas he's really this great sort of wild, feisty stallion. He's huge.
He's stunning. He is stunning.
Yeah, he's a beautiful horse.
Absolutely stunning. So he can become one of your passions.
He's been a passion of mine for a while, has Neddy. Neddy the magic horse. And I've made him. There are people in other countries. There's some people in America, I think it was their wedding anniversary, 50th wedding anniversary, and they said, all we want to do is come over to England and meet Neddy.
And the owners don't have a clue.
The owners don't have a clue.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
That Neddy is world famous.
So these passions, we've got Neddy, we've got dinosaur bones and the fossils.
Yeah.
But also there is the artwork as well, both the vintage fabrics, but also, I mean, I'm sitting here looking at a stunning tiger that you said you bought at the age of 11.
Yeah.
But we're also surrounded by stunning artwork.
Yeah.
That you've collected through your life.
Yeah.
Where did this love of this style of artwork come from?
Yeah, I can explain that exactly. It was, you got to think it was the 1960s, and the Beatles went into Eastern mysticism, probably around 65, 66. And I remember George Harrison wanting to buy a Buddha. And then one of my brother's friends at school told his mother he wanted a Buddha for Christmas. And then my brother wanted a Buddha. And then me being 5 years younger brother, I wanted a Buddha. So then my brother and I, we used to go around antique shops and spend our pocket money on anything Oriental, sort of touched us somehow. And if you start collecting Oriental art when you're 11, by the time you're in your 60s, you're actually quite an expert on it. So I've had there's been particular areas of it which I've specialised in, and one of my main specialities is the Japanese woodblock print artist Utagara Hiroshige.
And there are
Yeah,
pictures,
there
there are
are
prints
woodblock
over
prints
there.
and there are paintings by him there. And if you're collecting anything, as Steve Etches told me, at a certain point you have to specialise or you get too overwhelmed. So I've now specialised in finding actual paintings by Hiroshige.
Are they rarer than the woodblocks?
Much rarer, because
Right.
the woodblocks you'd have got maybe 20,000 impressions of each print printed back then in the 19th century, whereas an actual painting is just a one-off thing. He only did one of it.
So far
Far,
rarer.
far rarer.
And I've just noted behind me, because I said, oh, is that a rosewood stamp? So this love of
woodblock
the
printing.
woodblock, and I'm
Yeah,
going to give you that to show,
yeah,
because this now influences your work as well.
yeah.
And this little, and now that you say it's an elephant, of course, that now fits
With
into to your 5-year-old self.
Because
as well.
the reason I bought this from India quite recently was with Hiroshige and the other Oriental artists, they have a seal that they imprint on their work of art. And I thought, oh, I'd like a seal to have on the bottom of my works of art, which I could print and then sign my name beneath it. And so obviously I thought an elephant would be a good seal,
Absolutely
my
perfect.
artistic seal like Hiroshige is.
Over on your desk, which we'll get a look at
Yeah,
later, another starting point on your work,
yeah,
using another vintage
yeah.
a vintage fabric. So you find the vintage fabric, it sparks something. What happens next?
You find the amazing fabric. I see it for sale. I think, wow, just think what I can do with that. It's beautiful already. I'll make it more beautiful. And so I buy it, and then I'll either use sections of it and rearrange it and build up a new design, or if the design is perfect as it is, I'll redraw it exactly as it is, probably just altering the colours.
But of course, because they're antique, there's no copyright on them.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that
No.
to stop.
Copyright's been over for about 150 years on most of them.
They're not going to mind.
No, they're long gone. Because with, if you think it's something like anyone can produce a volume of Shakespeare, but you do your own edition of it.
Right.
So it's in what's known as the public domain. So you can use anything as inspiration if it's in the public domain. And the way art works is most art at one level is copying. You're either copying something you've seen out in nature, which someone else designed.
Yeah. And doesn't have a copyright, thank goodness. Yeah.
Or it's an artist or a designer from history, which again is long since it's in the public domain, it's there for anyone. And in the 1980s and 1990s, when I did furnishing fabrics, you'd sometimes have 3 or 4 fabric houses would actually have their own edition of the same antique fabric, and that was fine because they were all doing their own versions of it.
Wow, okay.
So that's not unusual.
Yeah.
So like another case in point is William Morris.
Mm-hmm.
William Morris is out of copyright, so anyone can produce a William Morris fabric. The thing you can't do is say it's by William Morris, because the word William Morris is copyrighted as a trademark.
Yeah, we get our William Morris through the correct William Morris channel, so it's all authenticated by his foundation, and that's how it comes to us. So you can have a William Morris print, but it can't be said to be. It's fascinating how all these things come. So is there an original idea?
It's difficult to say, because on one level there are so many things you've experienced in your life that then they all come up in your consciousness suddenly, and you think, is that original? There's your own sort of way of putting, like the Ammonites, that's original to some degree, and I've found those Ammonites and I put them together in that combination. But I didn't invent the Ammonite, so.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because I think I read somewhere that you can process any one time there are like 11 million different senses that we are processing, but you will only actually be able to focus on around 36, I think, at any one go. So
Yeah.
let's say. So actually, we could all experience exactly the same thing, but out of those 11 million different stimuli that we're getting, we're never going to pick the same
No.
36 things. So everybody's experience is going to be different.
Yeah.
And what I've come to realize is that the quilts and what people make with your fabrics are also so beautifully unique. How does it feel when you see your designs in somebody else's vision?
I love that. It's so amazing when you've done all this stuff and then you see the way someone else has put it together and used it. And there was a case in point just a few days ago where a lady,
Oh, yes.
yeah, on Facebook, I think her name's something like Val Swisher, I think that's her name. And she'd cut out my different flowers, mostly from my KFC fabric, and she'd arranged them so amazingly that I thought, wow, that's a new textile design right there that she had created, which
It was stunning. I think, because I looked at it and I
Yeah.
thought, this lady fussy cut all of these.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, I recognised them from the KFC
Yeah.
collection. And just, wow. So, will that now inspire you to go on and put something together that way?
I'm going to do something like, I'm going to do a design inspired by what she's done. She'd used my pictures of ornamental kale, some lotus blossoms, and my Japanese chrysanthemums, and with morning glories stuck amongst them. So what I'm going to do, I'll plan it in the winter and paint it up next summer, is I'll do a completely new, really dense design of ornamental kale, Japanese chrysanthemums, lotus flowers, and morning glory flowers, exactly the way she's done it. It won't be the same plants and it won't be exactly as her layout. But everyone said if that was a fabric, I'd buy miles of it.
Yeah. No, it was absolutely exquisite. Yeah. And that's her take.
That's her take, which is feeding back and inspiring me.
Which is amazing. And you also have the most stunning quilt, which we'll have a look at outside. It's kind of a star, and then it's just this rainbow of colour, this riot of colour going out. And you go to sleep looking at this, you wake up looking at this. Who made this?
That was made for me by a whole lot of women all around the world, but
who gets to say this? Women just send me gifts.
But it was a brainchild of a very kind lady in America called Pippin Williams, and she sort of coordinated and did a lot of the stitching together of it in the end. She did an amazing amount of work, and I haven't got round to doing it yet, but I'm actually going to send her one of my paintings as a thank you gift.
The quilters I've come to realise are an incredibly generous bunch. There's a lot of love in the quilting world, and a lot of generosity, and we see that at Sewing Quarter a huge amount. So it's really lovely to be able to see how these fabrics, and they're great sharers. So the fact that, you know, your designs people take and then share that inspiration that you can then take and reuse in a new way. It's organically bringing about beautiful things. So will you ever end up designing a quilt?
I have actually had some ideas for a quilt, and Liza Lucy, who works with Kaffe on the books and who is part of the Kaffe collective, she's gonna, if I draw my idea out, she's gonna design it properly for me, because I don't know how to do it. But I've had these several ideas for quilts actually using ammonites.
Nice.
So I thought it'd be amazing to have a huge great ammonite in the centre of the quilt, huge, and then maybe smaller ones dotted around the outside of it. And then I thought of another one where you could have a whole almost pattern like that as a quilt, where there's all different coloured ammonites making up the quilt with perhaps a border of other ammonites around the quilt. So I'm going to do a rough sketch of that, and Liza will draw it up as a pattern.
There is something very satisfying. I think it's called the Fibonacci sequence.
Oh,
As this, and we see it in nature a lot. It's
yeah.
in your pine cones, it's in your snails and your ammonite. It's there, and we recognise, and it's very, very, very satisfying.
Yeah.
So maybe that's, you see, science, it comes back into it, doesn't it?
Science
Without
keeps
even
creeping
knowing.
back in, yeah.
But then, Leonardo da Vinci, an amazing artist, amazing scientist,
Yeah.
they don't have to be separate things.
Even maths, I have to do quite a bit of maths, getting those things in repeat.
Yeah, now how does that, how do you create a repeat?
Repeats are dead easy.
Okay.
People think they're so complicated. Because all you've got your basic design, and let's take this as an example. And all that's got to happen is that bottom bit there has got to join up to that bit there.
Okay.
So all you just do that with tracing paper. So if you're working...
So it's as simple as that?
Simple as that. If you've got the bottom painted up, you'll just trace off the bottom and then put it on the top, trace it onto the top, and then fill in the bit in the middle. And that's really easy. Side repeat, you've got various side repeats. This one is what's called a half drop. So I've divided the design in half. There'll be a subtle line there.
Yeah.
So that bottom quadrant there joins up with that top quadrant there. And that one there joins up with that one there. So it's giving you a more varied repeat. So that flower there is coming again there. Whereas if it was a side repeat, which you can do, you'd get that flower coming again there. This way, you won't get that flower coming again there till way over there.
But you get that one from there. Oh, I see.
So half dropping it gives you more variety. And you can do any variation on a drop. It doesn't have to be a half drop. You could do a quarter drop or whatever. So that's repeats, and it's dead easy.
Because we often get asked, what is the size of the repeat?
Yeah.
Because obviously if someone's making a dress, then they might want to end up with more fabric to pattern match.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously this is quilting fabric.
Yeah.
But I have seen some stunning dressmaking using your fabrics.
Yeah.
Was that an accident that you just, and then you see it and you think, oh yeah, no, that works really well? Do you ever think of dressmakers?
I do, because when I first left art college and I had my agent, I was actually doing fabric design for dress fabric.
Right.
So when I'm designing it, I'm almost more thinking of dressmakers and picturing it going up someone's long dress or long skirt, of how it's going to repeat up there and how well it would work. My fabric's very suitable for both, and one of the people I worked for in my freelance days was Hardy Amis, who was the Queen's dressmaker.
Doesn't get a lot better than that, does
Yeah.
it, really? But then you also had your furnishing fabrics crop up at the White House.
Yes, the Clintons used my furnishing fabric.
How did you find that? Did you just see a news clip and go, hang on a minute, I recognise that?
I saw it in the American version of House Beautiful. It was on the cover, and there was an article inside. I might have it somewhere. But I was quite pleased about that. So I was hoping if she got in again, she'd want some more fabric. But it didn't quite work out.
It's Trump not coming knocking.
Donald hasn't so far asked for any of my fabric, but you never know.
You might see it in the White House.
I might do, yeah.
Or on the Queen.
I'd like to see it on the Queen. I know, I've been told in the past that the royals have had my furnishing fabric.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Does that mean that you can do the by appointment?
I don't think I can do that, no.
And yet it's okay for HP Sauce.
Yeah.
I mean, hang on, there's something missing here.
I'd love to see the Queen in one of my fabrics.
Well, she does have bright colours because she has to stand out, doesn't she? Get John Scott to whizzer up something. Something a bit special.
Yeah.
And send it to us. See if we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Mind you, some of these shirts for. Everyone at home knows that John is very very proud of his
Oh
shirt
yes, I've
collection.
seen him in his shirts.
And I think we should have a Philip Jacob John Scott shirt collection.
Yes, one of those presenters on program Top Gear used to wear fabric in my shirt sometimes.
Oh really?
Yeah, I can't remember what his name was at the moment.
Is it May?
May, it's
Yes.
May. Yeah, May wears my shirt sometimes.
So do you have a collection of fabrics for dressmaking as well?
It's just the same
It's
fabric
all
as
the same
the
fabric.
quilting, yeah.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
So there's nothing stopping any of us.
No, anyone
From
can
having-
make dresses and clothes and things out of the fabrics. I so hope they do.
Do you ever walk down the street and see some of your fabric in something someone's wearing or in a bag?
I'm trying to think if I've seen that. I may have done, but it's something in the back of my mind where I have. I often sort of walk down and see it in shops and things, and I've seen it, my furnishing fabrics I've seen in Hollywood movies, and
how does that feel?
it's quite strange to think, oh, I did that. It's strange the sort of journey it's gone to suddenly end up in a Hollywood movie.
Is there a feeling of pride or just, oh, that's nice to see?
It sort of works at two levels, because on a sort of temporal level in time, I think, yes, well, that's nice that they should use my fabric. But then if you think back to the sort of life movie, you think, no, that was just all sort of part of the unfolding of the movie.
In their movie, movies.
Yeah, movies, and all the movies. There's one big movie, which is like all these myriad interlocking little movies where we all play these different roles for each other.
And paths cross.
And people inspire each other. And even in history, the way I'm inspired by William Morris and Hiroshi Igi and Hokusai and others, and in 150 years' time, these will probably be inspiring other textile designers. So it goes on.
I'm not sure you'll have to wait that long.
Down through time.
I really don't.
No.
I think they inspire people now, and art forms take so many different forms. There are so many different mediums. You know, look at the quilters. This is an art form in and of its own right. And yes, it's adjusted. Yes, it's put together differently, but it's still being there, and it's morphing into other beautiful ways of your image going out there. I think it's just incredible, and the generosity that an artist such as yourself has, that says, you know, this is okay, take it and make it your own, and then to be humble enough to say, actually, I love your design, I'm going to now use that to inspire me to go on. I think is just incredible. Have you ever had a block? Because so far it's I've got 5 on the go and
I don't really ever get blocks.
I didn't think. I thought I'd ask. I didn't think it sounded like you did, but
there are sort of so many ideas bubbling up, but it's more a question of which one am I going to do next, and when can I do that one. So no, blocks I may have got right in the early days. There may have been, what shall I do next? But now, with all my archives and collections, there's just so many designs I've got queued up, waiting for their moment to be made manifest. I don't think there'll be any blocks for the foreseeable future. I'll sometimes think, when you come to the end of a design, you get really excited as you start putting the sort of final colours on, and then you've got to start all the way at the beginning again. And the early bit, and the one we'll show you in a minute, where I'm right at the first colour, I'm actually not going at that hammer and tongs. I'm going off swimming and looking for stuff in the fields more at the moment. But in a few days, that will have picked up its own momentum. And when I start to see it falling together and the strong, rich colours going on it, then that drives it.
So it's a bit like when you start a new box set. You get bereft because you've just finished
one.
That's
right, yeah.
And then you start and you're like, I'll watch one episode and then maybe
like,
2.
Yeah.
And then you get into it and you binge watch.
It's just like box sets.
Philip, I can't believe where the time has gone. Thank you so much for your generosity in sharing all your passions with us, and also lending us your time as well. It's been amazing. And what a beautiful part of the world. And we will look forward very much to, well, firstly, launching your stunning new collection and the next ones to come. So thank you.
That's very kind of you to say so. Thank you so much. And as I've said before, you're such a good interviewer.
Well, thank you very much. But it's been an absolute joy and a privilege, actually. And long may Snow Leopard be a part of the Saren family.
I hope so very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.